Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. This is Ukraine War News Update, first one thereof for the 25th of October 2023. Sorry I'm a little bit late, it's chaos here and I was back very late last night from, as some of you know, I went to a gig of my favourite band, a band called James. They had an orchestral 40th anniversary tour. They've been around quite a long time and I don't know, 16 studio albums now. They had their 40th anniversary tour with an orchestra and a gospel choir behind them. I went to Bath for them in Bath in the West Country to see them a couple of hours away. It was, and I've seen a lot of bands, and I've seen James a bunch of times, like 10 times or something. I used to spend my youth going to bands all the time, and yeah, massive music collection. The greatest gig I've ever been to. It was absolutely stunning on so many levels. The orchestra was phenomenal. They're all into it. Like, you just staring. I had a front row seat. I was so lucky to just absolute luck that when I bought the tickets, as soon as they went on sale, I couldn't get the Royal Albert Hall, so I went to Bath, and the last one in the tour, other than the Royal Albert Hall, and everyone was trying to go for the Royal Albert Hall, and I got a front row seat in Bath Forum, and could see the whole mechanics of it. And then, you know, lead singer Tim Booth, who, fun fact, contributed to my stem cell therapy treatment back in 2019. So that's amazing. But, you know, getting to look into his eyes when he's only a couple of meters away from you. And it was seated, but everyone's up on their feet after sort of half the gig. And yeah, it was just absolutely amazing. As I was saying, the musicians of the orchestra just absolutely in the zone, the people in the choir in the zone, just everyone loving it, and I'd shed a tear a couple of times. It was that good and that emotional, and those songs, but the emotion with which it was all performed, and it was just insanely good. I can't overemphasize how good last night's gig was, which is great. So I'm happy, you know, and I get to enjoy stuff like that, where people in Ukraine probably less so, and we'll go to there now. Just a housekeeping note. I have a properly crazy next week or so full of interviews and stuff. I hope it doesn't affect my schedule much, but just to let you know, I'm going through a pretty mad period at the moment. Right, Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find those in the description to the video below. 800 personnel lost, which is still on the high end of the range we've seen since the counteroffensive began, although I wouldn't necessarily call it the Ukrainian counteroffensive now, because I think Russia are on the offensive more than the Ukrainians. Well, depends what you're talking about. 7 tanks is a drop, but still a pretty, 7 tanks to lose in a day is fairly careless. 28 armored personnel vehicles, that's a high number, and 44 artillery systems is huge. So there are still massive numbers being posted by the Ukrainians of the Russian losses, and you can add to that 5 multiple launch rocket systems, which is one of the highest days I've seen for a long time, and 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, when the average of the losses in this category is less than 1 a day. So losing 2 in 1 day is a real challenge. So the Russians have had a bad day at the office yesterday. Of course, there will be losses for the Ukrainians. 9 drones and 1 cruise missile. That's not from last night, but from the previous night. 27 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 1 piece of special equipment. So logistics still being hit badly. Artillery systems taking a massive toll there, and armored personnel vehicle losses shows that the Russians are still pushing in a number of places. There are claims that they are committing fewer armored vehicles to the Avdiivka front than they have been, so they kind of learned from their mistakes, or they just don't have vehicles left, but still significant losses there. Andrew Perpetua, the mapper that I refer to an awful lot, he looks at video and imagery from both sides, actually skews it towards the Russians to try and make sure he's as accurate as possible, but he has shown over the last, well, I don't know, 3 weeks or so, absolutely incredible losses to the Russians. Occasionally there are days where there's parity depending on what each side are doing. Here we have one of the days where it's not parity, but it's certainly proportionally speaking, there have been more Ukrainian losses here, and you can see that's mainly in the tanks section. So anyway, as we go to look in greater detail at the losses, we've got a few bits of artillery. That Zupok 1, that $10 million piece of kit is at the top there. Artillery, and then he's got civilian trucks. I don't know why he's obviously seeing the loafers more important than tanks these days, so he's put them up there. But yeah, a lot of civilian trucks lost. A number of tanks, T90M thrown in there, as well as a few T72s, a few IFVs and trucks and whatnot. So fairly, I guess, average spread across the different categories. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, have lost a number of tanks here, including 2 Leopard 2A4s. Sorry, 3 Leopard 2A4s. Now, that is a significant loss for them. These are some of their, it's not the best tank they have, but it's among the best tank. You know, they're different variants of the Leopard 2s. They do have some Leopard 2A6s. But yeah, to have 3 of those on the list is going to hurt the Ukrainians an awful lot. As we can see, 2 of them are damaged, 1 is abandoned. That could mean that all 3 are able to be recovered and fixed, but it also might mean that the Russians hit them with IED dropped munitions as well, drone dropped IEDs as well. So don't know yet, but one would be hopeful as a Ukrainian that they could recover those. But nonetheless, that is some high value Ukrainian equipment there that they have lost. Talking about high value, so in the Zaporizhia direction, I won't show you this in case I get in trouble, but you can go and check all these videos. They are linked below. The Zaporizhia direction, the SSO soldiers have burned through 25, well, not burned through, they've taken out $25 million worth of Russian equipment just in a few numbers of pieces. So here in this video, you've got the Zupok radar, that's $10 million. You've got TOS 1A, a thermobaric. In fact, there's a couple of those been lost recently. You've got a BM-27 Hurricane, which is a much more recent version of their multiple launch rocket systems, and a BM-21 Grad. Just really high value stuff being taken out, and the replacement costs of the Russian losses for this war are just phenomenal, which is why I keep saying that I think Russia have effectively lost this war, in the sense that whatever happens, it will be at most a Pyrrhic victory for the Russians. They will be unable to replace the stuff they have lost, given how much it will cost in replacement. You know, even if you're talking about BMP-1s, yeah, okay, they've got low unitary value, as in they're not worth a lot. They're really old bits of kit, but they are worth a lot, because if you were to then replace that kit, you have to build a new one, which would be considerably more in value than the BMP-1 is worth. And they are, as we have seen, absolutely, they're losing stuff hand over fist, the tune of gazillions. Now, of course, Ukraine is still losing stuff, so it's not like it's completely one-sided. But I just think, as far as where Russia were geopolitically speaking, militarily speaking, apparently, they are just going to be unable to commit themselves to any other major offensive going forward. Yeah, certainly land offensive. So, yeah, here we have the flag that is on top of the slag heap. So there's different rumors as to what's going on with that slag heap, and who it's controlled by. There is this Russian flag that was planted on top of it. Thank you very much, Ivan, to a bit of a tea delivery there. We have, yeah, and I know there is a certain irony that my partner's father's called Ivan. We had the flag that was placed on top of the slag heap some days ago, apparently being hit by a drone, an FPV. Loitering munition takes it out, so that flag is no more. That's obviously a bit of a PR thorn in the side for the Ukrainians, so they decided it was worth them taking it out. Here we have Russian FPV destroying a Leopard 2A6. Now, Andrew Perpetua has 3 2A4s. I don't know whether one of these 2 has got it slightly wrong on the type, or whether this is another Leopard that has been taken out, which would be even more problematic for the Ukrainians. This is by the 47th during a mechanized assault near Robotina. Blowout panels seem to have saved the crew. So I have another example of Western kit being lost, but crew surviving, it appears, which is a real benefit to using that kind of equipment. And here we have Ukrainian military reporter Butasov, who we've referred to previously with regard to what's going on in Avdiivka, states that a small Wagner unit was destroyed in Avdiivka. He claims that the banner was recovered from the first dead group that attacked positions of the 110th Brigade, adding that Shoigu is throwing Wagner's into battle despite the failed mutiny. The post is a bit optimistic, and the banner might have been with them for other reasons, but an interesting development nevertheless. I mean, I'm not going to go and look into the details of that. You can pause and read that if you want, but it is evidence that Wagner elements might well be operating in the Avdiivka area, and in this case, that whichever unit it was, whether it was a Wagner unit or just a unit that happened to have their flag, they were taken out by the looks of it. Now, Shoigu has done what Shoigu does, which is say ridiculous things. Quote, they shot down 24 Ukrainian planes in 5 days. Shoigu boasted of the new analog weapon. So the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, Serhiy Shoigu, said that they had new complexes that shot down 24 Ukrainian planes in 5 days. Just absolutely no idea where I do know where he's pulling that statistic. His posterior. I doubt that's anywhere near true. I don't know what he is meant by a new analog complex, a new a new air defense anti-aircraft warfare system of some variety, I presume. Don't know anything about this, but apparently 24 Ukrainian planes have been shot down in the last 5 days. Just the problem is when you say things like this, it's the old Aesop's fable, "Don't cry wolf." You know, if you say something like this, you are not going to be believed. And this is the problem with the Russians: is sometimes they make claims that have truth, but because you've had your fingers burnt so many times in seeking to believe what they say or believing what they say or whatever, you're very cautious about anything they say. And so when people like Clive Engel in my threads just consistently every day repeat the splurges of TASS and the claims of the Russian MOD of Ukrainian losses on a daily basis, when they repeat that stuff, you're just like, I'm not even going to read it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it because they are full of absolute BS almost the entire time. But then, of course, you are discounting stuff that can be truthful. But that's the fault of the Russian MOD for just lying through their teeth so often. Right. On to distance strikes. So last night, Russia fired 11 drones, 11 Shaheeds at Ukraine. All of them were shot down. So this is another night of 100% interception. But again, you're wondering why they're only sending this many drones. It's about finding out where the air defense is, almost certainly. And my prediction is you are going to find that the Russians will send a massive wave or a series of massive waves of missiles and drones at Ukraine, and it's going to be coming soon. I feel it in my bones. They will send Kinzhals, they will send cruise missiles, they'll send a lot of anti-ship missiles. I have a feeling they're going to absolutely hammer Ukraine at some point soon with a whole probably suite of waves of munitions of missiles and drones. Yes, it's going to hit things like the energy infrastructure, but there will be other targets as well. So Ukrainians will know this for sure. They know it's coming, and that's why they keep talking about it as well. Of the drones that were sent last night, I think Khmelnytsky, which is the region that has the airbase that sends the Su-24s with Su-24Ms with the cruise missiles, that's often targeted. But here we have, there are lots of rumours and claims. Ukraine says it shot down the attack drones, but debris fell on 11 high-rise and 9 private buildings. Also damaged the local police department, and here photos of the fire station where debris also hit. Now, why this is significant is because, if I can find it, it's here. The number of injuries in Khmelnytsky region has risen to 20. Ukraine says its blast wave in Slavuta caused all the injuries and damage. The village is just 10 miles from the nuclear power plant at Natishin. and this is causing a little bit of a worry for a number of people. So following my post, says Tim White, about how close the blast wave was to the nuclear power station in Khmelnytsky, Ukraine's state news agency now admits that there is damage to the plant. Almost 2,000 households were also left without electricity after Russia's attack. I don't know whether this power plant will be targeted. I doubt it, because that would be pretty much PR suicide for Russia. But that's not cool. And you'd hope that energy infrastructure, at the very least, is not harmed in any way, because the effects can obviously be pretty disastrous. Now, from the Ukrainian point of view, Bryansk was targeted, it appears, as there were 10 explosions very early this morning. The authorities stick to the traditional script, says Tim White. This time, 4 drones were destroyed near the village of Suponevo. No photos, indeed, only a recording of some sounds during the air defense. I won't play you then, but you get the idea. We often see these CCTV pictures that have sounds of explosions. So there were targets in Bryansk. What they were targeted with, what the targets were, and how successful the attack was, who knows? Kherson, though, early this morning, regional government reported that there may be people trapped under rubble after nighttime bombings. No fewer than 10 bombs were fired last night. These are aviation FAB 500 or bigger bombs, and they have been littering the Dnipro River region with these bombs due to the fact that the Ukrainians are gaining footholds across the river in that area. And so this has traditionally been tradition, you know what I mean? For some time, it's been one of the main targets for these aviation bombs, that stretch of the river right down from the estuary upwards towards Novokhovka, Berislav. The Russians have hammered particularly the right bank with these aerial bombs. Now they are hammering the right bank as well as the left bank and the bridgeheads that the Ukrainians have, possibly because they don't have the artillery capacity in the area to do that. So they're using aviation, which is effectively able to operate with impunity in the area due to the asymmetry of air forces and taking into account air defenses or lack thereof in certain areas, at least medium to long range air defenses. Now, how ATACMS strikes affected the use of Russian aviation at the front. So this is pertinent to what I was just saying. When we started to receive ATACMS, says Alexei Danilov, Secretary of the National Security Defense Council, is that? When we started to receive ATACMS, the use of the first batch exceeded all expectations. Now, this is 5 missiles used. I have been trying to work out whether they've used them again. They were supposedly given 20, so they've still got another 15. You would have thought they would have hit the target straight away. So there is a chance they've used ATACMS. Maybe I've missed out bits of news. There is a chance they've used them, but we don't know about them having been used. The news hasn't got out for one reason or another. Maybe they weren't as successful. Maybe the targets were kept quiet. Maybe the Russians didn't want to. Obviously, the Russians didn't want people to know about it. So they might have used more of them. I don't know. But he might just be referring to those 5. But he says the use of the first batch exceeded all expectations. Keep in mind that after that, the attacks on our troops, as far as helicopters are concerned, decreased. And this is exactly what I've been wondering, which is the effect of hitting the Berdyansk Air Base and the Luhansk Air Base with ATACMS that have been really successful, knackering a whole bunch of airframes, a whole bunch of helicopters. Did that have a meaningful effect? Yes, they would have pulled back helicopters to bases further back. That would have affected the support of these helicopters to their frontline troops in terms of logistics, taking longer, refueling, therefore having probably less flight time in the target areas, these frontline areas. So that would affect the amount of support from aviation that the Russian troops are getting, but also just having fewer airframes, fewer helicopters as they've been blown up or damaged so that they can't be used at the moment. Alexei Danilov is saying that, yeah, that has had an effect. Right, there are emerging reports that Belbek Air Base, so this is where I wonder whether ATACMS are being used, it wouldn't surprise me at all, in Crimea was attacked, although I need to look at the distance, with reason per the link. So this is from last night to this morning. At the Belbek airfield in Crimea, the occupiers have already placed MiG-31 aircraft, which in the case of modification can be carriers of daggers. Those are Kinzhal missiles, hypersonic missiles, or supposedly hypersonic missiles I was talking about. Successful Ukrainian ATACMS, so as you can see here from satellite imagery, you've got 4 MiGs there at the very least. So, successful Ukrainian ATACMS or S-200 strike at Belbek may well see a number of Russian Air Force MiG-31 Kinzhal launchers and Su-27s turned into burning debris. Here's hoping. Absolutely, yeah. So you got Su-27, Su-30, Su-30. So you got other Su-27 there, other aircraft available to be targeted at the airbase. So I think this would be a great place to use ATACMS again. And I was just amazed that they didn't fire everything off in the first 2 nights of having the ATACMS. But I don't know, maybe they did. Maybe we don't have the information. So explosions were also reported in the area of Sevastopol near Kazachia Bay. Now, there was panic in another arrival was noted in Cape Violet, south of Sevastopol. There was panic on the Russian Telegram channels with people saying, I've seen the translation of this, I can't find it now. But people saying, yeah, my windows are almost off and this is some way away or whatever. It seems like these were big explosions in Sevastopol area. But, this is going back 15 hours now. So it's a long time ago. Don't know what happened, but no reports continues. Rebar claims that Ukraine attacked Sevastopol with either S-200 or FRIM-2s, judging by the absence of sounds or of secondary detonation and other signs of arrival. The missiles were shot down or did not reach their target. He adds, of course, that's Rebar saying that, so take that with a pinch of salt. So, yeah, Sevastopol, Crimea has been targeted over the last 24 hours with possibly some fairly significant munitions. But again, just waiting for further details to come out of that. Now, Zelensky's speech, moving on to other bits and pieces. He said last night, received reports on the arrival of equipment, ammunition, new contracts, and new geography of supply. Heard information about the front, Kupiansk, Avdiivka, tough, tight battles, but our soldiers hold their positions. The enemy tries to destroy indiscriminately everything he can reach. Berislav, so that's near the Novokakovka Dam. Borova, that's up in the Oskil River, up sort of opposite Novoherivka, kind of near Svatova, where they were attacking. And the idea is that's where they're heading for because they keep bombing it. But he says, we eliminate the consequences of shelling. We help people, which is kind of to say that we overcome the challenges of these bombs, not that we eliminate the bombs at source, but actually the consequences, which means we clear up and etc. We are preparing for terrorist attacks on energy infrastructure. So this goes back to the missile barrages that they are almost certainly going to receive fairly soon. This year we will not only defend ourselves but also respond. Now that is a nice cryptic thing, and that's something I was almost mentioned earlier when talking about these missile barrages. Ukraine can't just keep soaking up the pressure of these missiles. That's not how you do it. It's like, prevention's better than cure. We know this kind of thinking. There's no point endlessly putting sticking plasters on your wounds. You just stop getting wounded, right? There's no point dealing with the symptoms of your diseases you keep getting. You need to prevent yourself from getting those diseases, which means that they need to do something about the Black Sea Fleet that's launching these, about the bombers that launch these from within Russia. So although this is somewhat cryptic and it could just be hopium, as they call it, which is like almost promissory notes of, yeah, we're going to do something. You would expect them to have some big, significant plan in place to do something about that. And I'm interested to see what that might be. Obviously, there are things like having their own missiles and long-distance drones to fire into Russia that are indigenously built, so you don't have this problem of Americans and British and French or whoever saying, yeah, you can't use these to hit Russian targets inside the Russian territories. if they make their own, that's not a problem. So it could just be that. It could be partisans. It could be, I don't know. We'll see. And the development of new maritime drones is certainly something that is on a card. Something like a torpedo drone would be great. The enemy knows this well. First, they removed the fleet from Crimea, so the enemy knows that we're constructing ways of dealing with this. Now they're also moving their aviation further from our borders, and that would be with reference, I think, to the ATACMS strikes as opposed to anything else, I think. Anyway, moving on, Bloomberg says Russia steps up cyber attacks to disrupt Ukraine's key services. I've done a video on cyber before to say that there is no difference in many ways between cyber warfare and conventional warfare. So, for example, with conventional warfare, if Russia are trying to take out, in exactly what we've been talking about just now, take out energy infrastructure by using Kinjal missiles, for example, they're going to use these hypersonic missiles to take out the energy infrastructure. Well, if they're going to use hackers to disable the energy infrastructure, you've got functionally the same outcome. It's the outcome that matters, right? It doesn't matter whether it means destruction of bricks, personnel, or systems. You want to stop energy infrastructure working to screw over your enemy, right? So cyber warfare, this is what I was talking about before. I don't think the international community has placed cyber warfare high enough on the kind of ladder of escalation, because we have seen cyber attacks from Russia on other countries, not just Ukraine, but other countries allied to Ukraine. Now, for me, that is functionally the same as going to war. There should be massively, but of course, countries don't want to go to war with Russia, right? So they're like, oh, we've been hacked. Rather than we've been hacked by them, and that is basically an open declaration of intent on us, which is parallel to war. This is cyber war. This is war. You are attacking us, and you are attacking our infrastructure and what we own and our nation with cyber weapons. Cyber weaponry. That's war. So I don't know. Let me know what you think. Ukraine recorded nearly 4,000. So the point of me saying this is A, this is news, but B, we sometimes forget that all this other stuff is happening when we're talking about this tank got blown up there and that bit of land got taken there. There is stuff that's different to that's happening all the time. And here we can talk about cyber incidents, 4,000 of them happening from January 2022 through to September this year, with most of them coming from Russia, according to government data seen by Bloomberg. And most cyber attacks are originating in Russia. Others, I don't know. China, a place like Belarus, I don't know. Other, maybe Middle East, I don't know where cyber activity is prevalent. Russia's Air Force is eating into aircraft lifespans with no easy solution, says Breaking Defense. When it comes to the Russian VKS, their Air Force, all you can say sometimes is thank God for shoddy maintenance, a NATO nation military aviation analyst has told Breaking Defense. And indeed, there's lots to talk about in this article. I just want to go to these. This is actually from a RAND report. So the VKS is still transitioning from Soviet-era aircraft to more modern platforms. The current rate of new aircraft coming online is so low that almost half of the fleet are upgraded Soviet-era airframes. Modern Russian aircraft are designed for 3,500 to 4,500 flight hours service life, and some for as many as 6,000. But the Soviet-era platforms were designed for 2,000 to 3,500. Some models, such as MiG-31, have been upgraded to extend service life. But most of their older models are nearing the end of their service lives, with only 500 to 1,000 hours remaining. In the first few months of the war in Ukraine, the VKS was flying 150 to 300 sorties per day, compared to peacetime rates of 60 per day. This has fallen since then to 100 sorties a day. That's interesting in itself, right? The fact that they are flying maybe a third of what they were at the beginning of the war tells you an awful lot. What it tells you, I don't know, but there are lots of theories of what it could tell you, which is they don't have the capability that they did, or at least the capacity to do what they were doing originally, because of airframes being blown up, airframes having maintenance needs, or being near the end of their lives, or falling apart and not being operational, so on and so forth. You would imagine they've got the same needs, the same military needs, so they need to fly 300 a month. Maybe they don't have munitions as well, so the bombs, although they are using a lot of aerial, FAB, KAB 500 bombs and so on and so forth. I don't know, are they using them at the rate they can make them, so that they are using them at max capacity? So anyway, let me know what you think it tells us. But going from 150 to 300 sorties down to 100 sorties a day, I think is significant. The high flight hours being flown by older aircraft is, quote, equivalent to losing roughly 34 aircraft since the start of the invasion. So the loss figures from the general staff, which take these with a pinch of salt, I'm not wholly sure. I think nearer the beginning of the war, there were some analysts saying that the aircraft stats from the general staff were the least accurate on these figures that they release. So the 320 aircraft and 324 helicopters might well be a long way off, but either way, whatever the losses are, you can add, it claims here, another 34 aircraft to that, in terms of they just wouldn't be operational anymore due to being flown so much. However, this only captures the losses relative to the lifespan of newer airframes. Because the older airframes have so few remaining hours, it's actually equivalent to losing 57 VKS airframes. This results in total true losses closer to 187 VKS airframes. Extrapolating this, the VKS will continue to lose 30 to 60 airframes a year from combat, accident, and imputed losses. So they have very different loss figures to the general staff, as I've just shown you. But nonetheless, they are saying whatever our figures are, you can add a whole bunch on due to these reasons. By the summer of 2024, combat losses and imputed flight hour losses may put the VKS below 75% of its pre-war strength. If you were a year and a half ago, if you were NATO a year and a half ago, and say that, you know what, maybe in 2024, we're pretty close to now, in 2024, the Russian Air Force will be flying at 25% of its pre-war strength. NATO would be going, awesome, let's do it. Well, what are you talking about? Yeah, let's do this. And if you then showed them the loss in terms of personnel, APVs, tanks and whatnot, and artillery systems, and said they'll also have these losses or somewhere near that, even if you half those losses, right? NATO would be like, well, that's brilliant. Let's do it. So this is really, really debilitating for the Russian capabilities. Anyway, very interesting. Lots more to say about that. That's just the RAND reporting there. As mentioned here, there's also talk about shoddy maintenance and the challenges of maintenance in greater depth. Anyway, finally, Ukraine accuses Russia of dropping explosives into the shipping corridor in the Black Sea. So this is a shipping corridor that the Ukrainians are now using to great effect, that's really increased the volume of grain exports that are leaving the Black Sea via the Bosphorus Straits. As I've mentioned before, you've got the Montreux Convention there, which it's Italy, which Turkey enacted in order to close the Bosphorus Straits to warships from both sides, or any warships really. But there is still the ability to export from both countries, from Russia and Ukraine, and they are hugging the coastline to export grain in greater quantities. But Russians are, according to the Ukrainians, dropping munitions in along that area. Of course, there's going to be discussions of international airspace, international waters, and then national waters, and so on and so forth. Spokesperson Natalia Humeniuk told national TV this morning that, quote, presumably this is done with the aim of obstructing the movement of civilian vessels and discrediting Ukraine. So it's something to keep an eye on. Anyway, thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate your support. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.